Whether polishing or honing, this is an example of one of the polishing lines. If you look here, it's all automated. The machinery that you see here allows, it's a mechanism that feeds slab after slab through this polishing line. And as they make its way through the polishing line, there are actually calibrators on the machine that measure the slab as it's going into the polishing line. That way the grinding heads will stop appropriately where they need to. And if you look up close here, there's a close-up picture of some of those polishing wheels. And these machines can be made up with 36 different discs, ranging from coarse all the way to a buff, until it gets through the other side of the line and it's polished. Also, there's some polishing done by hand. As you can see, this gentleman's using a handheld alpha water polisher and an air polisher. He's doing the edge work, so after the surface is finished through the slab polishing line, some of the work has to be finished by hand to do some decorative edges and whatnot, and this is an example of how that can be done. There are machines on the market that also do this, but a lot of it has to be finished by hand anyways, and still continues to be to this day. Another finish here, we're talking about flamed or thermal. It's interchangeable, they're synonymous. This is a textured finish created by a high heat that desegregates the crystals of the surface. They'll actually pop off from this high heat of an exposure to a propane flame. This process leaves a very rough finish. It's not something that's typically used in a countertop application, but something that might be on a horizontal plane, would be a floor, or some vertical planes. They might use it as some wall cladding or something like that. Most commonly used with igneous rocks, which we know are granites. Taking a look at this, how the process is done, it can be done by hand, which is in the bottom right, or by machine. And what it might be difficult to see in the slide is, with that high heat from that propane torch that's desegregating the crystals to give it that rough texture on the surface, immediately following this, right with it, is cool water cooling down the system. If you just went with the hot flame, it could actually lead to some cracking of the stone. So you have to have cool water cooling it immediately. A sawn finish is exactly what it sounds like. Once they cut a block, or they cut slabs or tiles, whatever finish that saw blade leaves is a sawn finish. A lot of times that finish is not that desirable because it's very dull, and through the sawing process, a lot of the stone dust particles get stuck into the pores, leaving it looking very dusty or chalky and not having a nice color to it. So one of the treatments that they will use, if they're going to use a sawn finish for an application, is they will actually hit it with high pressure water, which takes all the stone dust particles out of the pores, bringing back the true natural color of the stone. Sawing blocks of granite after we saw the quarrying process. Those blocks, those huge giant blocks that typically range in a dimension from, on average, 9 or 10 feet left to right long and roughly 5 to 6 feet tall. You'll get some that get a little bit higher. One of the restrictions with blocks are the gang saws that are on the market. A gang saw is this mechanism here. If you see, there are multiple blades set at the desired thickness of what type of material you want to produce. The block goes underneath it, is fed under it on a conveyor line, and some of these machines, the bed will actually rise up while the saw is working back and forth, and some, the saws will actually go down and cut through the block. And it depends on the machine. What the most common analogy I like to tell people, because a lot of people, they can relate to this, is if you ever have seen a bread slicer where they take a loaf of bread and the bread slicer slices through the whole loaf and they all come in equal sized parts. That's an analogy we use often in this industry, because within that block, all of those slabs are going to be relatively virtually identical. Similar to a loaf of bread that may have a hole of an air pocket, well, several of the slices behind that piece of bread will also have those holes, showing that it's an analogy that we can show the consistency throughout the block. Now, a gang saw like this, most of them on the market takes about 3 to 5 days to saw through a block of granite, and that's running 24 hours a day. Has water on it as well as abrasives in the water that help the blades cut through the block of granite. A sanded finish is a highly textured finish created by abrasive particles hitting the stone at high velocities, typically sandblasting. A lot of this application will be done in decorative, or they'll use it for flooring material because it has a nice non-slip characteristic of it, as well as they'll use it for some decorative pieces where they will use sandblasting to engrave some type of writing for a memorial or something of that nature. Other finishes that are out there are gazed, water sculpted, bush hammered, tumbled, acid etched, a lot of different types, and every day people are experimenting with their own types of finishes. They'll combine a flamed and brushed finish and try to come up with a new marketable type of finish called leathered. So many people have heard of a leather finish, which is becoming more and more of a buzz. People hear that brushed or leathered. Basically what a leathered finish is some combination of a thermal and brushed finish or just a brushed finish. But from a marketing standpoint, it sounds much nicer to call it leathered. Well, this has been presented to you by Marble and Granite. Again, my name is Jonathan Ferengia, and it's my pleasure to educate you on some of the products that we have in natural stone. Thank you. Look for more in the future. Take care.